This is just the beginning of the Suga era. I'm running this shit till 2035, baby.
1 year later.
And no!
So the Suga era has come to an end about 11 years before Sean thought that it would, and in this video I'm going to talk about why I'm not surprised at all by that outcome and why I don't think Sean will ever make it back to championship status again. In addition to that, I also want to touch on the ridiculous comments by Sean suggesting that he actually won that fight when that is absolutely ludicrous. And even though I'm a little late to this, I want to touch on the overall card of 306 and a little bit about the Sphere as well, so I will timestamp everything for you down in the progress bar. But before I get to all those things, if you find that you enjoy the video, please give it a like. That helps me out a lot. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that as well. I would love to have you here for future content. So if you ever find yourself in the position of doing predictions for MMA, you will soon learn that you sort of get a peer pressure to pick fights a certain way. And in the case of O'Malley versus Merab, I definitely wanted to do a video on this fight in the lead up, breaking it down, but in the end I decided against doing it because I kept finding myself at conflict with the way I thought I should be picking it versus the way I felt in my gut that it would go. I kept feeling like I needed to pick O'Malley to win and probably by knockout, when the reality was I'm not surprised at all that Merab did to him exactly what he did. So as I said in the opening, I want to explain why I'm not surprised at all by this outcome and also explain why I don't think Sean will ever reach championship status again. Now, if you look back throughout MMA history, you will see a lot of cases of particular fighters who got to the status that they got to because they were there at the right time. And in the case of Sean O'Malley, not only did timing work out for him, but there was also some strategic management of his career to get him to the belt in the easiest way possible. And I don't say any of this to discount what Sean has actually accomplished because he is an incredible fighter and I'm a massive fan of his. And by no means am I saying at all that Sean's going to lose his star status because that's not going to happen. But I do think at this point the road back to an actual title for him is going to be exceptionally difficult because the people who are going to be there and holding those titles are going to be all bad matchups for him. Now, I actually happen to be in the camp that he lost the fight that he had to Petr Yan, and if Yan had been given the win in that fight, obviously the trajectory for Sean would have been very different. But in the end, obviously he was given that win, and Petr Yan was probably the closest representation to a Merab that Sean was going to have, and because of the way he struggled in that fight, it wasn't surprising at all that Merab did what he did because Merab beat Petr Yan. And the fact of the matter is, Sean O'Malley is built for striking. He's not built for wrestling. And with guys like Merab and Umar at the top of the division now, it's going to be really hard for Sean to ever get a win over either one of them. Now, a lot of people will probably say that Sean is going to learn from this fight and he's going to come back a much better wrestler. But I always push back when people say things like that because Sean knew exactly what he was getting into in this fight. And there's no doubt in my mind that they did a tremendous amount of grappling preparation for it, and yet they still weren't able to stop what happened. So the idea that because he's experienced it against Merab, that he's going to suddenly be much better at defending it in the future against him just doesn't make sense. And the way he's built for 135, being tall and skinny and without much muscle mass, is not only going to continue to make it easy for the guys down there who are wrestlers to take him down whenever they want, but he's not going to be able to put on the muscle and the strength that he needs to defend against it while staying at 35. Now, for those who will point to Aljo as a win where he obviously did not get taken down and was able to knock him out, I think there was more than just that simple equation at play. First and foremost, Aljo had a short turnaround and he was frustrated by the fact that they were forcing him right back into a fight with O'Malley after his win over Henry Cejudo. And on top of that, just from seeing Aljamain over the years, it's clear that he is the kind of guy who can let things get into his head. Whereas I think somebody like a Merab is much more resistant to letting things like trash talk and all the rest really bother him or affect the way he's going to fight. So absolutely yes, that win for O'Malley over Aljamain was very impressive and really was the pinnacle of his career. I really feel like there was more at play than Sean straight up proving that he was able to neutralize good wrestlers. And at 29 years old, I think we are seeing Sean in his prime right now, and I don't think we're seeing him in a stage that's before his prime. And so while he will, of course, get better at pretty much everything he does, I don't think we're going to be able to see enough change out of him that will make him a dominant and reigning champion. So on top of the fact that I think Sean O'Malley is always going to struggle with and probably lose to the elite wrestlers in his division, There's also one other thing about Sean that I talked about in a previous video in his lead up to his fight with Cheeto that I think is going to be a real challenge for him going forward, and that is the fact that his body is fragile. Sean O'Malley has proven to be not only injury prone outside of fights, but also in fights. If we go back to his fight with Andre Sukumtoth, he throws a relatively normal high kick that hurts his leg and his foot so bad that he's not even able to stand anymore. And the only reason he won that fight is because it was so deep into the fight that he had already done enough to win the decision. Then you had his first fight with Cheeto, where Cheeto landed a standard-looking leg kick that pretty much took Sean's leg out and led Cheeto to getting the win in that first fight because Sean couldn't really stay on his feet anymore. And yes, I'm aware it hit the nerve, but the point remains. Then going into the Aljo fight, it became known that he had a bad rib injury and wasn't really able to grapple in the lead up to that fight, so he did get lucky that he was able to knock out Aljamain so early. And then in his second fight with Cheeto, he basically stayed untouched for the majority of the fight, but at the end, Cheeto landed a hard body shot that really hurt Sean and made him have to sit down and recover. But luckily for him, it happened at the very end of the fight, so it wasn't able to have any impact. But had that shot been landed earlier in the fight, it definitely could have changed the outcome. And now, after the Merab fight, we learned he has a torn labrum and could be out for as long as a year. So my point in bringing these up is to say that Sean O'Malley, at 29 years old, isn't going to get any better at not having injuries. And he's not the kind of guy who can be in a war like what we saw with Ribovics and Zellhuber. He's just simply not built for that sort of thing, and so as the competition he faces continues to get better, it's going to put him in a bad position. Now, it is fair to say that some of the reason he's so injury-prone could have to do with the fact that he cuts all the way down to 135. And while he perhaps could lessen some of that by moving up to 145, if he does so, he's going to start to lose a lot of the natural advantages he enjoys at 135. At 145, he's going to start to run into guys who are as tall or taller than him, and who also have as long of a reach or longer reach than him, and also guys who are just generally a lot stronger too. So I don't really see going up to 145 as a very viable path for him either. But with all this said, I am a very big fan of Sean O'Malley, and I want to see him do well. His fights are almost always exciting to watch, and what he has been able to accomplish is absolutely incredible. So I don't say any of this stuff to crap on Sean. I'm simply trying to be realistic with my overall analysis about him and where I see things going in the future. Now, I will say it was very disappointing to hear his commentary after the fact suggesting that he actually won the fight against Merab, because the fact of the matter is, after watching that fight a second time without the commentary as he suggested, you really have to try to give Sean any rounds in that fight. And I think really the only one that you could make a strong case for is round 5, and that's because Merab took his foot off the gas and coasted to his win while allowing Sean to press forward and kick him a few times and all the rest. But at the end of the day, Sean still ended up on his back at the very end of that round, and had there been more time, Merab probably would have just jumped on top and finished it the way he did many of the other rounds. So there is absolutely no case whatsoever to be made that Sean won that fight. And I found it so much more appealing when he was honest after the fight and he just straight up admitted to losing. That was a great look for him and a change of the way he normally handles that sort of thing. But then he went right back to the same stuff he did after the Cheeto loss and just acted like it didn't happen. And overall, I think it's just going to cause him to lose some of his fans. Now, with regard to Merab, I don't know what it is, but a lot of people just do not like this guy. So saying anything positive about him is going to be an unpopular opinion, but I think he deserves credit for what he was able to do. I don't think his fight with Sean was boring. He did what he needed to do to win that fight, and he was a lot more active than many people are in grappling exchanges. He was taking Sean's legs out with knees to the thigh over and over again. He was throwing heavy punches at him a lot in those exchanges as well. I just don't think that the criticism of him is warranted, and I'm not sure why people feel that way other than they just don't like him. Now, in terms of UFC 306 itself, I thought the card overall was pretty amazing. It was one of those cards where you saw the first fight and you thought that was great and you didn't know how the next one was going to top it, and then it did. And yes, the Shevchenko and Grasso fight was a bit lackluster, but it wasn't awful either. And as I said, I thought the main event was a good fight. But I'm pretty sure that was the latest card that I've ever experienced, finishing at almost 2:30 in the morning Eastern time. And it was a combination of the fact that every fight on the main card went to a decision, plus all the extra stuff for the Sphere. So I really hope it's a long time before we have any card that comes close to finishing that late again. Now, in terms of the Sphere itself, I think it was definitely one of those things where if you were there, it was probably pretty incredible, but at home, it was really a bust. There wasn't a single thing about it that I couldn't have done without. And overall, I don't think it really added anything to the fight card itself. And while the storytelling stuff was cool in theory, I just don't feel like it landed that well. So from a standpoint of whether or not they should ever go back there again, from a viewer, somebody who's pretty much always going to be watching it from home, I could not care less if they ever did another Sphere event again. So those are all my thoughts on Sean O'Malley, Merab, the Sphere, UFC 306. Let me know down in the comments whether you agree with my positions on these things and what you thought about the fight and the event and where you think Sean will go from here. As always, I appreciate you watching the video, and if you found that you enjoy it, again, please give it a like. That does help me out, and make sure you subscribe so I can have you back for future content. Thank you very much again. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.